Hello. A quick disclaimer, this podcast discusses the world of wellness and mental health, but it's not a substitute for the help of an appropriately qualified professional. On with the podcast.
Hello and welcome to A Spoonful of Theory, a monthly podcast looking at the facts, theories and stories behind the world of wellness and mental health. Each month, Jenny and I are nearly joined by a guest with the same passion, interested in all things mental health related, to present their fact from the past, present and future. But today, unfortunately, our guest couldn't make it. So you're stuck with Jen and Benny. Yeah, I was trying to make it sound a little less ice cream-like.
Oh, I see. Okay. That's like the dairy-free version.
Only because on social media, somebody's been mocking us for that a little bit.
Nice. Oh, well, it's good to be mocked.
Previous guest has left us a review with a
mocking
ice cream theme.
Okay, that's good. I'm all right with that. Yeah, so we're a bit Jimmy Naples tonight.
I'm not Scottish. I don't know what that means.
Frederick No Friends.
Billy No Mates.
Billy No Mates.
Frederick No Friends. And we've just found the title of the podcast. So, shall we start with today's fact?
Yes.
And that's your fact, Jenny.
Oh, it's me. Okay, good. Brill. My fact this month is that the smell of flowers can doom you to failure.
Really?
Yes, it really can. You always never believe me. You never believe my facts. They're always
to do with flowers and
trees, animals, rats.
I tripped over once in front of a florist, so maybe.
No, this is to do with an experiment from the Monell Chemical Sensi Center in Philadelphia.
Sensi Center.
Yeah, Senses Center in Philadelphia. And what they did was they took some unsuspecting folk and they put them in a maze and asked them to find their way out of this maze. But unbeknownst to them, it was an impossible maze to solve. I'm saying they put them in them. Actually, I'm not sure. That for all I know, it was on a piece of paper. But in my head, they're trapped in this maze. And
doesn't seem ethical either way.
No, it's all a bit horrible, isn't it?
Yeah.
Solve this maze, and actually, secretly, they're all behind their glass or whatever, kind of looking at them, knowing that they couldn't be solved. But what they did as well is they pumped in the smell of flowers.
Right.
Whilst this was going on, and everybody failed solving this maze.
Any specific flowers, or?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I was trying to think of something witty to say there. I have nothing. So I'm just going to press on with the fact that then what they did was they took these people again and they gave them another maze,
right,
which was solvable. But for some of the people, they just let them get on with it. Mm-hmm. But for another group of people, they pumped in the same smell, this floral scent. And the people who were exposed to the same smell as when they'd failed previously were significantly less likely to be able to solve the maze.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So there was a very strong correlation between that sort of olfactory experience and their ability to perform later.
Okay.
So even though doesn't seem directly related, smell of flowers solving mazes, the fact that it happened at the same time was enough to trigger that sense, that pattern of behaviour.
That's really interesting. Did they say anything about the type of smell? Could they put different smells in? If it had been a bad smell, would they have been more likely to get out of the maze quicker, do you think?
Oh, no, they didn't look into that specifically in this, but they are looking forward in terms of thinking, well, you can make the smell of failure, can you make the smell of success?
Right.
And could that enhance things like sports performance and this kind of thing?
Okay.
So the interesting thing about the sense of smell and why it does seem to so strongly trigger memories and emotions is because it links so directly into our sort of primitive brain, into the amygdala and the hippocampus.
So it's very closely related.
Very closely. I mean, like physically, the anatomy of the brain is that the scent organs are very closely related, and so that's why they can trigger things so quickly.
I think that's because they're the kind of primitive areas of the brain. They're linked to, I suppose, when you're a small mammal, like a vole or a mole, you don't use your eyesight as much. Actually, there you're using sense of smell and sense of touch and things like that, far more than these other senses to kind of garner information, I suppose.
I suppose things like touch as well. But if you've touched something, it's a bit too late. If it's touched you, it's got you.
Less said, the better.
But I think the thing that intrigued me about it was the fact that it was so stark, the evidence for this, and other evidence about how strongly these things are, but also this idea of association, and there's other research. I think this is quite well known research by what's her name, Carol Dweck. She's a professor of sort of behavioural science at Stanford.
Mm-hmm.
She did a test with fifth graders. That's an American system. I don't know how old they'd be.
I don't know either.
I think they're quite young kids anyway. And she asked them, there's 400 of them, that's a hall full of a lot of children, to complete a set of puzzles. And on the way, one group were praised for being smart,
mm-hmm.
and the other group were praised for the effort that they made.
Right.
And then what they found was subsequently, when these kids went on to do other puzzles, the ones that had been praised for being smart didn't perform as well as the ones who'd been praised for their effort.
Right.
And there's been a lot of subsequent studies around this. I think this was probably one of the earlier ones, but there's been a lot of study around that, about how we talk to our children and what that does for their mindset.
Yeah.
Which I find quite interesting. Again, it's this idea of an external actor on you predicting success or failure in a quite obvious way. I mean, I can understand if you've got a parent saying the same things over and over and over again to a child, you think, okay, fair enough, that is going to make a difference. But that just through one set of puzzles and then moving on to another set of puzzles, that it would have that response so quickly.
Yeah, it's amazing. In a lot of ways, we're so complex that it's difficult to predict what the outcome of doing something is going to be. I first read about these kind of studies in 59 Seconds by Richard Wiseman, which I've mentioned a few times on here. But I love that book. I read it in 2007 or something like that. And they're talking about, actually, if you're going to praise your child, you should praise effort. Yeah. Rather than praising rather than getting them to success. Because actually, if you tell your child, if you give them those kind of that praise where it just says you're brilliant, then they always just want to be brilliant. They don't know how to get there specifically. Yeah. They just want to be brilliant. And actually, that's a predicator of somebody that might cheat in a test as well. Because actually, they just want to be, look, you expect me to pass this test. You expect me to be brilliant. It's not about the effort that it takes to get there. It's just, I want to be brilliant. So they're I can't remember the specific study or specific numbers, but they looked at this in children, and actually quite a lot of them cheated when they could. Given the opportunity, they were more likely to cheat because they were used to this kind of praise and just trying to kind of just garner the praise rather than garner praise for effort. Yeah, well,
I've read it's this idea of fixed mindset.
Yeah.
You know, you are this.
Yeah, that's
compared to growth mindset, and how people can sort of grow out of their experience, and also talking about person praise. You are pretty, you are clever, you are smart.
You are good or bad.
You are good or bad.
Yeah.
Versus process praise. You did that well, you tried hard at that. But it's interesting because...
Process praise is a really good way to talk about it. I've never heard of that.
Yeah. But it's interesting because Carol Dweck now, she's I'm going to say the grandmother. She's probably not that old. She's probably terribly offended to hear me say that. But she's like the grandmother of this. She was the one that kind of paved the way, I think.
Sorry if you're listening.
Yeah, I'm really sorry, Carol. Do you want to come on the show? She doesn't now, does she? But she's supposed to pave the way. But it's interesting now because this has got into a lot of sort of parenting manuals and this kind of thing and that kind of thing. But she said that actually people are starting to not use it quite how she meant it to be used,
right? And
that people are now just praising effort, like, you tried, it's important to try, right? You know, so it's not actually, it's sort of empty praise, it's not useful. So people aren't getting this idea that it's about praising the process, genuine praise of genuinely the process. And also she said that she's observed people thinking that they're not praising the outcomes, but still being very disappointed when their kid has tried hard but hasn't met their expectation.
Right.
So there's still that kind of stuff around there. So it's not as simple as just knowing the theory. Yeah. It's interesting that, you know, teachers know about these things. It's across the world. I think it was an Australian colleague of hers who first noticed that actually people think they're doing this kind of, using this theory, using this scientific study,
but they don't quite get it.
But they're not quite getting it, and they're not quite applying it quite right. It's morphed into something else.
In a lot of ways, it's about how we use words rather than the words that we use. and the perception of the child as well to what you mean when you're saying that. You can say you're trying really hard, but if you're doing a sad face when they're doing it, it's not going to have the same effect. So I sometimes think we concentrate too much.
You're trying really hard, big thumbs down.
Yeah, I'm crying now because I'm so happy that you're trying. But I really would have liked that prize money. I'm glad you tried not to get drunk on your birthday. He's only 2. But I think, a lot of time we look at the minutiae of the specific language we use, and language does have an effect. It is important, but in a lot of ways, it's our cultural use of that language. It's how we come to language, the meaning behind the language. And with all of these things, it's about meaning, really. A lot of the things you're talking about there are praising somebody and giving them a sense of identity, kind of solidified, I am good, I am bad, I am whatever. Whereas actually, what did you call it, process praise? Is more about skill, giving them a skill. So one's a building skill and learning, and one is setting identity.
Yeah, and I think you're right about it. It's the way we use the language. But I think to use the language, it doesn't start with the point where the words leave your lips. It starts from forming the idea and the intention in your mind. So I think if you want to praise a child or another human being for what they're truly doing, you have to pay attention to what they're truly doing.
Yeah.
And I can understand that in some settings where there's a lot of pressure doing a lot of stuff, you're stood in front of 30 kids, for example, as a teacher. Your mind is thinking, I'm doing this target, I'm doing this. You're maybe not really seeing the children for what they are. So you've got this theory, you've got this idea, I'm going to praise the process, but you're not actually seeing the process. You're not actually paying attention, maybe through no fault, but you're not being very alive and present in that moment.
Yeah.
Because that's where the language starts from, isn't it? So I can understand that people do the theory, but without the thinking and the effort in the moment.
Yeah. Anything to add to that fact, Jenny?
No, that's me. Thanks, Ben.
Okay, so I'm going to go on to my fact, if that's all right with you. We're very, very...
so considerate.
There's no guest, we're just got to be considerate to each other today.
Yeah.
So my fact is that I went to the doctor and he told me to jog on.
Yeah, he sounds like a nice person.
I don't have a specific doctor because I see about 50. But, so this is talking about social prescriptions. So I read this in The Economist, which I've just started getting interested because it has a lot of stories that aren't just about the economy. Honestly, I thought it was just about the economy. So I've just started reading that.
Do you actually read it, or do you just walk around with it sort of tucked under your arm to try and make you look a bit brainier?
Both. Both.
Have you got the Beano inside it?
No, I read the other one. What's the one with Minnie the Minx? Is that the Beano?
Oh, I don't know. I think I read the Bunty when I was a girl.
Oh, right.
Anyway, okay.
I've never been a girl, but... So, one review of studies on social prescribing showed that, on average, it was associated with a 28% fall in GP visits and a 24% drop in attendance to emergency wards.
Can I show my ignorance? What would be a social prescription?
So, if you'll let me get on with it.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm just keen. It's such an interesting fact, Ben.
So, a social prescription would be going dancing. But these are prescriptions, so they're non-medical prescriptions from doctors, I suppose. That's when it's an actual prescription. There's doctors in Blackburn, which is where I'm from originally, who prescribe volunteer work. Some GPs refer people to, or patients to, link workers. So these are people that can actually arrange and give you support and financial advice to help you do these different things. So you like playing ukulele? Am I right?
Yeah.
Ukulele can be...
I don't know if anyone else likes me playing ukulele, but I like playing ukulele.
Well, yeah, that can be considered socially prescribed. There's loads of health benefits for this. So in Cambridgeshire and Cornwall, there's an Arts and Minds charity that runs a weekly workshop, part funded by the council, where patients can sketch and sculpt.
So there's resources for this. That's how it becomes a
There's
GP.
starting to be, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Sadiq Khan in London included the idea of this in the health plan for the capital. There's a social enterprise near Liverpool that helps to organise activities including ukulele lessons, tango classes for patients referred by GPs. One group formed a choir. And they get funding from the NHS, National Lottery, local councils. But they say that they save £10 for every pound spent, which is huge. And especially, I mean, that's taken into account that 28% fall in GP visits and the 24% drop in attendance to emergency wards, all just through these social prescriptions.
This doesn't sound like brand spanking new thing if they can see that it's already having effect.
I think these are in small areas. These are small studies, so it's not been rolled out across the whole country. I suppose where somebody in the council has got an interest in this and is trying it. Because I often talk about how it would be nice to prescribe community engagement or talking therapies before kind of dishing out drugs and things like that. I'm not a doctor, so I have no right to prescribe anything. But it would be nice if those were seen as helpful in the first instance, in my personal opinion.
I wonder as well if it's being prescribed by someone that people will actually take it very seriously. I think it's very easy that you can kind of know things are good for you, but in any given day they get pushed out. To go for a walk would be good, but I have to do my online grocery shopping, or I need to go to work, or I just need to get people. You can push those things out. Otherwise, it's a bit like going to a doctor, them giving you antibiotics because you have some horrible infection, and then going, well, I'll just not take it.
Yeah, but I mean, even if you give people
now,
drugs that have, in some studies, have shown to help, anxiety and depression medication, then the doctors, especially in America, I'm not sure about over here, but in America, they're told how to prescribe those drugs, how to give them to the client, how to talk about them to their patients, because actually the placebo effect has an effect on drugs as well, and also the nocebo effect. If you give somebody a pill and say this is going to make you sick, that's not going to help you, is it? There's people that talk about why Viagra's named and things like that because it sounds like Niagara. So it sounds like something, if you called it, I'm trying to think who it is, Dr. David Hamilton, I think, who has the book How the Mind Can Heal the Body. He says if they called it Flopsy, it wouldn't have had so much of an impact. So it's again, back to your fact in a sense, it's how you describe these things. Not just specifically the words you use, but how you give them across.
Well, this is what I mean. I wonder if it's sort of validating it, and it's kind of going, no, you need to take time out to go to the gym because this is part of your getting better.
And so you're right, it has to be almost a holistic approach, which I suppose it can be very difficult when you've got 10 minutes to see a lot of different patients. And that's why it's only in small areas at the moment. I suppose it's difficult to roll that out, and you have to have, I'm sure all doctors are passionate about certain areas, but you have to have a committed group of people to kind of put this forward, and the link workers and the kind of community engagement around that to kind of put it forward and get it out there and be, it's a cultural thing. It's a wider cultural thing.
I think there's something I'm thinking about here is that I wonder for some people what that would feel like to walk into a doctor's surgery. I wonder what people walk in with, what their complaint is. That they walk out with a prescription for tango lessons, for example, or volunteering, and how that, you mentioned about how things are presented and put forward.
Yeah.
And I wonder for some people that they come in and they say, I must have a vitamin deficiency, or there's something terribly wrong with me, I'm terribly tired all the time. And the doctor's sitting there thinking, we've done every test under the sun, I think you're depressed. But that person doesn't want to be, who wants to be depressed, but doesn't want to be diagnosed as depressed because they think that would be a weakness, because there can be there can be stigma around these things. So I wonder sometimes if you have to have the right fit of a person. There might somebody walk in and go, oh, there's nothing wrong with me in the sense of my leg's not about to fall off, actually all it takes is this, and actually that's a really nice prescription, a tango lesson. They might feel really great about that.
Unless the leg has fallen off.
Well, yeah, unless the leg has it. That's a really rubbish prescription.
Oh, they may be good at tango.
It's like, well, never mind here. I imagine
it's the link workers that talk to you and find out what specifically.
Oh, you think so? That's the way to go. Yeah, because I just wonder if some people come in and they're quite doggedly. I just need the pills for something. I want pills to fix me.
We all like pills now, but I think I think this is about doctors engaging with clients, and I imagine that these doctors have a little bit more time to do that, and they probably see the same client for a little while, so that they build a bigger picture. They will still be doing tests and things like that. They will still be looking out for warning signs in multiple areas, whether it's our body or mental health as well. But I imagine they've got a little bit of a picture of the client before they prescribe these things. I imagine they don't just throw out voluntary work on the first kind of coming in, and I imagine they see the same doctor. As I say, I've never seen the same doctor twice. So, but when I was in London, I would see the same doctor twice, and when I was a child, we always had the same doctor. That's what's changed about the kind of that service. So I imagine in these areas they're going back to that a little bit.
I don't know, I quite like the idea of like a tombola, and you go into your doctor's office and they've got some sort of tombola rolling, and then they pull out a ball, and it's like...
Lex 11, you're doing the tango.
You're going to learn the trumpet now. You know, oh, you're going to do some,
but
gardening.
That might help. I mean, we go back to hypnosis thing. You talk about Milton Erickson, and he did throw some random things out there for people.
He really did. He was,
But also, in the room, like, we use the miracle question, we and sometimes a client will come with something that's so far left field, you wouldn't expect it. And in fact, that's good. That's when it's working. That's when we're helping people. So these things might actually be something they've not thought about, and actually help them a little bit, and they kind of send them in a different direction. And because they haven't thought about it at all, they've never considered it, well, again, you're right, it's how it's prescribed. If the doctor says, oh, you put a lot of effort in here, you've done really well, and he's got a sad face on. Back to your earlier fact. It's not going to help, is it?
Okay, so the third and final fact, for this episode, it's me.
Not a guest.
Not a guest. No.
Can you do it in a different voice?
I can put it on a French accent. I've just alienated a lot of people there.
Yeah, France.
The whole of France. To the whole of France, I apologise. I have watched too many episodes of Allo Allo. Anyway, I've completely distracted myself, but my third and final fact is it's about the marshmallow test.
Okay.
Yeah, and I presume you've heard of this, because I think this is pretty much in the public psyche. And this is the test that was done by a psychologist called Walter Mischel, and he did it in the 1960s and 1970s. So he really liked this test. It sounds like he spent at least 2 decades doing it.
And it's pre-chocolate hobnob, because that would have been way better than marshmallows.
No, well, he had very
other brands of biscuits
that are
available.
No, he had very primitive tools. He only had marshmallows back in the day.
So when I think about this test, I immediately imagine the child catcher from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. But actually, obviously, these are under like lab conditions, and they're getting children to go into a room and they place a marshmallow in front of them. Yes. Is that right? And then they give them like a request not to eat it until they come back in the room, and they'll get 2.
What they say to them is that you can eat this marshmallow straight away if you like, but when I come back in 10 minutes' time, if you haven't eaten it, you can have another one.
I see.
So that's the premise, and the reason I'm presuming that you've heard of this is it's such a well-known test that I've even seen adverts on the telly sort of emulating it, sort of children really trying hard to resist the impulse to
Haribo,
eat.
or those jelly sweets are available. There's also a Netflix program, but they have a magician who does the marshmallow test, but then does magic with it. So he can pull them out of thin air, and he can make loads of marshmallows come out of his mouth, things like that. So it's part of our it's cultural
well known,
though, isn't it?
It's very well known, and like I say, he obviously thought it was interesting and significant enough to recreate over and over again for a time in the 60s and the 70s. And the idea was that they followed up these children later on, about when they were in their late teens.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it was the children who were able to resist eating the marshmallow, and they would do this in various ways. They would kind of sit on their hands or hum or sing, and some of them would lick the marshmallow but not eat it. So they would do all sorts of stuff to distract themselves from the impulse of eating it. The ones who obviously didn't gobble it up straight away. And the study is purported to show that later in life then, these children exhibited advanced traits of intelligence and behaviour far above those who caved to temptation. But the funny thing is that recently, for whatever reason, some folks at New York University and the University of California, Irvine, decided to replicate this. So doing it for 2 decades in the 60s and 70s wasn't enough. They thought, right, we'll have a pop at this. And they did it, but they couldn't replicate the same result.
Right.
So essentially now it's pretty much been debunked by new research.
Okay.
And what they found is it tells you something about the impulse control of young children. It tells you a little bit about that, but it's not a predictor of future success or failure of these children. It actually doesn't tell you that much about it. And the effect largely disappeared at age 15 in this new study.
Okay.
Once family and parental education were accounted for.
I see. And I found, so I looked at this today, and I was sure I'd heard this before, and there's an article in the Smithsonian website, Smithsonian, Smithsonian.com. Scientists replicated 100 psychological studies and fewer than half got the same results.
Oh, wow.
So this is huge because what this shows is a lot of the, and again back to the internet, a lot of these kind of headline grabbing articles, and articles we'll use in this podcast, to be fair, we will see them and then we will say, well, this is a good headline, let's use this bit of information.
Are you basically saying our podcast is a load of old bollocks, Ben?
I mean, that's not going to go in the podcast. but what I am saying is there's so much information and disinformation about. What we're doing is discussing. We try, obviously we have our own biases, we have our own ideas and opinions, but what we try and do is just have a chat about it. I'm not saying that anything we say in here is gospel, and I'm not saying that it's not either. What I find interesting is us two just having a bit of a chat about it and bringing our guests in to bring a different opinion. So no, it's not bollocks. But interestingly, there's a gentleman that's a co-author on this study, Cody Christopherson from the Southern Oregon University, who says
your facts always have the best. I mean, this is my fact. You're the information you bring. You always. I'm sure you just Google funny names.
I just make them up.
And just see.
I honestly just make them up. 2029, I'm gonna be called a fraudster for all of my made up facts in this podcast. That's not true. So he says this project is not evidence that anything is broken. Rather, it's an example of science doing what science does. It's impossible to be wrong in any final sense in science. You have to be temporarily wrong, perhaps many times, before you are ever right. So we get it wrong and wrong and wrong, and we keep testing it until we get the right answers. Does that make sense?
It does, though. It smacks a little bit of just going till you get the answer you want. But I don't think that's what he's saying.
No, he's not. And to be fair, it's very convenient that he can be wrong. Oh, we thought we were right, but we were wrong. But we're still going to do it again. I get that. But he also says getting it right means regularly revisiting past assumptions and past results and finding new ways to test them. That's the only way that science is successful, credible, and it's self-critical.
Well, I'm sure people who are involved in research could very much tell us that methods of research must be evolving all the time.
You've already said that. I mean, talking about just that marshmallow study and the way they recreated it. They recreated it in a slightly different way. I mean, in a lot of ways, that can be because test results are different these days. Test analysis of results is different these days. So the way you explained it there was they looked at different factors when they got a bit older. So they realised that there was familial factors in that as well.
Yeah.
So it's not causal, essentially.
Well, yeah, with the very original test, the chap Walter Mitchell, he took, the kids that he took were kids of his Stanford University colleagues.
Yeah.
So that was a very specific set of children.
Yeah.
Maybe in the 60s and 70s that was different. There was different priorities. I don't know. It's interesting. But
also culturally we've changed as well. So if you think about kids and adults now doing the marshmallow test, and you think about things like Amazon Prime or the way we expect things immediately, streaming television. So, quite a lot of us would go for that marshmallow straight away.
That reminds me of a test. That they did. They got some students into a room and they said to them, here's a little machine, and it administered painful shocks, I think. Anyway, some kind of painful
this
stimuli.
is Ghostbusters, yeah.
Ghostbusters.
They do this in Ghostbusters, right at the beginning of Ghostbusters. So Venkman he has a female student and a male student, and he's trying to look to see if they can see what's on the card. And he's giving them electric shocks, essentially.
No, that is not what I was going to go on to say. That is just Ghostbusters. I was really worried for a minute there. I thought, am I a complete moron?
But that's what it's based on.
Am I evidence size?
That's what it's based on.
But anyway, so they had these students in a room, and they had to sit in the room. I think it was only 15 minutes, and do nothing. But they were left alone in the room. The only thing that was in the room with them was this machine that would hurt them if they used it. And I can't remember what proportion it was, but a really high proportion of them, rather than just sit and do nothing for 15 minutes, chose to shock themselves. They would rather hurt themselves, have any kind of stimulus, than just sit there. And I was amazed at that. I mean, I could understand if it was like 10 hours, but really it was 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So it would have been interesting if you could go back in time and do that in the 1930s or the 1830s. What difference there would be then?
Yeah.
But you're right. It is interesting to recreate these studies. We don't have the same conditions, but we don't have the same people. Yeah. people have changed.
Yeah.
You know.
In a lot of ways, we're a lot more aware culturally of scientific testing. We're a lot more aware of stressors and stress and what stresses us. You know, even in if you think of Rorschach, the Rorschach test. I mean, that's a cartoon character now. That's a comic book character. There's films with a comic book called Rorschach. You know, people know about these things because they're part of our culture. The marshmallow test, we know it.
Yeah.
If you did it to me now, I mean, obviously my toddler wouldn't know what it was, but I would, and I'm sure we all secretly try it, don't we? With our kids, we get a marshmallow out and go, just leave that, and I'll give you 2. I mean, is that just me? Testing my own child.
I think that might just be you.
Okay. Thanks for joining us today. We hope you've enjoyed the facts and look forward to the next episode. If you'd like to follow us on social media, you can follow Ben on Twitter, that's me, at GMHip, or Jeni on the internet, Jeni with an I, nelson.co.uk. And if you did enjoy the podcast or have any comments for us, you can follow us on Instagram at a spoonful of theory, or on Twitter at a spoonful _, or you can use the hashtag a spoonful. And don't forget to give us a review on iTunes too. You can listen to the previous episodes on there and our amazing guests thus far, Jutica, Dipti, Rachel, and hopefully some nice guests for the next one as well. Yeah, so give us a review, like, share it. Anything else, Jeni?
Oh yes, and you can get in contact via our website, aspoonful.co.uk.
Aspoonful, full.co.uk. Thank you very much for joining us today, and see you soon.